Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Pokke Village Hunters. I'm Adell.
I am Rin.
And in this series we'll be talking about Monster Hunter related topics, and anything else of that nature, I'm sure.
And the lore, basically.
And the lore, yeah. So this is episode 1, Ren. So what are we covering today?
Today we're doing an intro to the Monster Hunter series for people who are new to it and have absolutely no idea what it is. Since we tried to do that with the Pocket Players episode, but we kind of failed. So
just a little. Well, we didn't really have enough time, and they just wanted to get I don't know what out of us. So
yeah,
I suppose we can cover it on here a little better.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's start off. What is Monster Hunter?
Monster Hunter is an action RPG. Very heavy on the action and less so on the RPG parts. The basic gist of the game is that you go out, you slay monsters, you collect parts from them like scales and horns and hides and that sort of thing, and use
other excretions.
Yes, and use that to upgrade and create new weapons and new armor so that you can go out and kill bigger and badder things and get more awesome stuff. And
the process continues. There's also a very nicely done multiplayer function in all the games. So if you want to go out and hunt with your friends, there's events that also happen. You can do that. And that's a nice touch. Yes, the multiplayer is usually restricted to 4 people maximum. It is not a massively multiplayer game. But well, in the sense that you're only limited to 4 people in your party. Correct. But there's a lot of people. Yes, there are. Well, of course, depending on the game that you're talking about. Some of them have, actual online servers that you can go to, and others are pretty much ad hoc only. Much like just the PSP ones. And the 3DS version of the upcoming WiiU. 3DS. So, how long would you say this game is? The average person will probably get at least several hundred hours out of it. If you want to be completionist and try to get everything, you will probably rack up 1,000 hours. I mean, unless you're good, but... hey now! But yes, it is an incredibly, how shall we say, time-consuming, yes, but you get a lot of time of entertainment out of this game for one game. I can agree with that completely. So what kind of monsters are we looking at Monster Hunter? It is not your orcs and goblins, as we said on the podcast. It is more dragons or mammalian monsters. Most of the creatures are referred to as wyverns, even if they don't have wings. But a wyvern is typically a dragon with 2 legs and 2 wings. There are, of course, other monsters. There's the elder dragons, which are typically, but not always, the more standard dragon that has, 4 legs and 2 wings. More of the European medieval dragons. Yeah. I suppose. Well, wyverns are medieval European also, but well. Yes, they are. To an extent. No, to an extent. They are. Well, the Welsh flag has a frickin' wyvern on it. Okay. Ma'am, those are classified as drakes. Thank you. No, they're not. Yes, they are. We'll have a discussion on the forums later about this. Anyway. Oh, wait, no, it's not the Welsh flag. That has a dragon on it. One of the flags has a frickin' wyvern on it. But, don't get me started on my dragon lore. I know more about that than I do Monster Hunter, alright? I know you got that. Not going to go into that. That's inappropriate for this. Anyway, hey! So, how challenging would you say this game is? You're terrible. Monster Hunter is very challenging. It's easier, of course, if you have friends that can help you. But, it's still a very challenging game. It's a very skill-based game. Unlike a lot of, say, RPGs that come out of Japan, where it's more grindy, just do the same button mash all over again to get your levels up, that kind of thing. So God Eater, got it. Well, God Eater is in the same... Well, it was inspired by Monster Hunter, let's put it that way. So many games were, but moving on. Yeah, Monster Hunter kind of spawned its own little genre, as it were, the monster hunting action RPG genre. And that a lot of games have come out afterwards. That are... I'm sure we will hear some flack about how Monster Hunter was actually inspired by something else, and that's incorrect. Well, but for now,
I'm talking about all the games that came after Monster Hunter, like God Eater Burst and the infamous Hunter Blade.
Oh man, Hunter Blade is the best game ever. But also don't forget, what is it, Ragnarok Odyssey?
Yes.
That just came out for the Vita. Mm-hmm. Pretty good game, though.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you like most about Monster Hunter?
Well, why don't you answer that, because mine's a little lengthy. Why don't you go first?
Oh. I like the environment, and I like how some of the designs look, honestly. Like the monsters themselves. Mm-hmm. I think Barioth has to be one of my favorite designs.
Yeah, Barioth is a kind of saber-toothed cat-looking wyvern. It's white. It has bright orange tusks, and it lives in the tundra, and it's very cool looking. Very
cool looking. And the armor that comes out of it I really like too. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's fun. And some of the event stuff you get too, like the mini Urigan was fun to fight. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. So that's
the fun, silly kind of things, the humorous things that Monster Hunter has. Because Monster Hunter does not take itself seriously at all.
Not at all. No. But at the same time, it still presents a challenge while still being fun with friends to a point.
Oh, yes.
And you're not yelling at each other about... Well, you might be, but usually you're not yelling at each other about certain things.
Such as?
So.
What do you mean by yelling at each other about certain things?
Like, when you're trying to get the shock trap set down and then the hammer comes along and upswings you.
Okay. So you're not usually yelling at your teammates for griefing at you or trying to screw you up. I usually laugh. Unless we're playing with you.
I'm usually the one doing it.
Yeah, unless we're playing with you, and then we're yelling about it all the time.
It's fine. You shouldn't be yelling. We're having fun. I'm trying to have fun. Crap, man.
All right. Let's see. The best thing I like... Stuff I like about Monster Hunter the most. Well, I am the lore geek. I love the world of Monster Hunter. It's very different from your typical fantasy setting, especially in a video game, because there's a lot of things that you would just take for granted in a fantasy setting, like there's usually magic. And there's usually, wizards and mages and supernatural things like ghosts and zombies.
I'm a wizard?
Yeah, exactly. And none of that is in Monster Hunter. It's surprisingly mundane for a fantasy setting. Of course, there's elements like, fire and water and thunder and that sort of thing, but that's kind of the extent of quote-unquote magic in the game.
Is there a dirt element yet?
No. Oh. No, there are no, robed wizards hurling fireballs at things.
Maybe for you.
It's all of their advancements in the world are technological. They have gunpowder, mm-hmm. They have, flying zeppelins and hot air balloons and that sort of thing.
And sharp edges.
Yes, and weapons and blacksmithing and that sort of thing. And I just really like that. I like that it's a little more sciencey. And a little less magic.
Fair enough. Yeah, you are living in a world of dinosaurs per se.
Exactly.
Where you are not the top of the food chain.
Right. So that's probably my favorite thing about Monster Hunter. On top of the obvious, the gameplay is awesome, and I love the monster designs because I've always loved designing creatures as an artist myself, and that sort of thing.
Please. Post your resume here at the end of the video. It'll be in the annotation.
Hey now.
Okay, so starting out in the game, depending on which game you do, mm-hmm. I suppose I'll use Try as the best example because that's the most recent one I played next to Portable 3rd.
And it's also the last one to be released in the West, which is where I imagine most of our listeners are going to be coming from. So
exactly. So you're starting off in what's the name of the village?
Moga Village is Try's
village.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Little village on the water, little island, completely separated from other crap. And it's a nice little place, You show up, and you're immediately, you go fight the beginning monster, which was it Great Jaggy as always?
Well, you don't usually start right off going into that. They give you a little tutorial first about
tutorial.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because this is not a game where you're just going to jump right in and start killing big things, and that's that.
You can.
You can, but it's probably not advisable, especially if you're very new to the series, because you're not going to know what's going on.
It'll be funny. Don't spoil it for them.
These people are newbies. Let's start them off at the very beginning.
Okay, I'll let you have at it.
All right. When you start off in any Monster Hunter game, basically, not just Try, you're doing not just hunting, but you're a hunter-gatherer as well. And you have to go out into the field, and there's usually a tutorial to help you along. But, and you will be gathering things like herbs for medicine to make into potions so you can heal yourself. And various other things, food to eat to regain your stamina. And that sort of thing. So it's not a game where you're gonna, your first quest you go out and kill something awesome. You gotta learn what the heck you're doing first.
Right. Crap, you kind of just hit everything on the head I wanted to say.
Okay. But yeah, so you go out, you learn, where to find these things. In the older games, it was a little bit harder to find because nowadays you run over something, and if you can gather from it in the field, a little thing will pop up over your character's head and tell you that it's there. But in the older games, that wasn't there. You had to you had to be observant. You had to look for things in the field that, were different than everything else. Oh, there's an herb over there. There's a berry on the ground.
Truly dark times.
I kind of liked it, to be honest.
No, that made it.
It would have been better if they had individual models for everything. Like, I could look and say, oh, there's huskberries over there, not just, oh, there's a random gathering spot over there.
Right, that's kind of one of the gripes I have with Portable Third. Like, the mining spots in, let's say, the Tundra Caves were just cracks in the wall, and it was kind of hard to spot if you didn't know where you're looking.
Yeah, these were always a little tricky. But that's another thing that you'll do in your gathering phase is you can mine things, you can catch bugs with a bug net, and you can use them and combine them with other things to make various items.
So, what are the first quests you do are usually gathering, right? And then I guess while you're gathering, Grey Jacket comes along and we go from there. But.
Yeah, and then you start off, you're killing herbivores for steaks. Usually an Aptonoth, which is a big kind of dinosaur-y beastie. But
delicious Reese's Aptonoth.
Delicious steak. And learn how to cook your steak and everything else. It's a nice little timing, little mini game there, I guess you can call it. Which
is a very necessary, but at the same time very tricky thing if you don't know what you're doing at first. You will get a lot of either burnt or rare steaks.
Yeah, basically you pull out a rare steak and you put it on a spit, and a little music thing plays. And when the music stops and your steak turns just the perfect golden brown color, you have to hit the button to pull it off of the spit. Otherwise, it will burn and it won't be very tasty.
Maybe for you.
Well,
burnt steak, doesn't it give you just a little bit?
Well, yeah, that's not completely useless, but it's nowhere near as good as a well-done steak.
Well, of course, nothing as good as a well-done steak. The rare and the burnt do give you a little bit of stamina, but that's about it. And stamina is very important in this game, as you only have 2 bars, health and stamina. Stamina will determine how long you can run, how long you can use certain weapons, and...
also, you use it when you're dodging. So you can't just dodge infinitely. You will run out of stamina, and then you'll be stuck.
Unless you have a certain item.
Yes. Well, there are items to help you with your stamina, but we can talk about that later.
Right. Yes, and then, of course, your health,
Yes. You have your health bar.
It does regen.
Your monster does not get a health bar, by the way.
Or lock-on.
No, there's no lock-on in the games, not even in the latest one. You have to actually be skillful when you're aiming your strikes.
Unless you're using a hammer, then you just...
Well, you still have to aim for the beast's head if you want to knock it out.
But I always aim for my teammates. It seems to work out.
Terrible. Terrible.
But as we said, there are items that will give you, infinite stamina, things like that. So what are some of the items, and how do you get said items for infinite stamina or health regeneration?
Well, as far as health is concerned, the easiest thing to get is an herb. It is very simple. It's just an herb. You pick it up in the field. It's a little green thing, and it will restore a little tiny bit of your health if you eat it. The best thing to do, though, is to take the herb and combine it with other things to make more powerful healing potions. If you combine it with a blue mushroom, you get a regular potion, which will restore more of your health. If you combine that potion then with honey, it will get a mega potion, which is your basic, it's the one you're going to be using the most. because it's the easiest to get, and it restores a pretty fair amount of stamina. Or not stamina, health.
You can carry a good amount of them.
Yes, you can carry 10 mega potions, 10 regular potions, and 10 herbs.
And 10 honey.
And 10 honey, yes.
There you go. So you can also combine in the field. Your chances are a little lower.
Well, it depends on the item.
You can buy,
and
sure.
There are items called Book of Combos, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, that you can carry with you if you don't mind losing the inventory space to hold them. That will...
unless you're a gunner.
Yeah. Anyway, if you don't mind losing the inventory space, you can carry them with you and make your combinations all that much better.
One thing I always want to know, does it matter which combo books you bring with you?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to start with one. You have to go in order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, you can't just put in combo book number 5 in your inventory. It won't do anything. You have to have them in order. And
so, do I have to have all of them to have? Does that give me a perfect 100% mixture? Right?
Well, each combination has a different percentage of. If there's a percent chance that it will fail and you'll just get garbage and you'll waste your materials.
Too zinny, man.
And the Book of Combos will basically increase that chance. So at some point you'll get to the point where you have 100%. But if you're making, say, Mega Potions, which I think are like a 90% chance anyway, you only need Book of Combos 1 and 2 to get that 100%. Whereas if you're...
So each one is 5%.
I forget exactly what it is, but you get the idea.
Okay. Yes.
Whereas if you're combining, like say, a dragon shot for your gun, something very rare and rather powerful, as for gunners, by the way, it has a much lower chance, and you may need 4 or 5 Book of Combos to make that 100%.
Which you should be carrying anyway if you are a gunner, but...
Well, sometimes you don't have space, but
Just don't bring healing items, that's cool.
Yeah,
just rely on the other guy.
Work well.
See, that's one aspect I like, kind of. You can be just the siege gunner, and then the guy next to you could be the healer gunner with wide range or something.
Somewhat, yes.
If you think about it. So, that is another thing. There are no specific classes, like cleric, warrior, none of that.
No. And
instead, what you have is just the blade master and the gunner class.
And they're not really... I hesitate to call them classes, because it's not something that you pick at the beginning of the game and you're stuck with forever.
No, you can switch between them at any time by switching out your armor and your weapon.
Yep. You can always switch your armor, you can always make multiple armor sets and multiple weapons, and just have as many or as few as you desire.
On the topic of armor, you can also mix and match. So you could have a delightful little clown suit made of chains if you really so desire it.
Well, I guess we're jumping straight to armor, and we'll talk about weapons afterwards.
We'll get to weapons, don't worry.
Yeah, for the armor, you make armor based on the parts that you get from monsters, and the armor pieces usually look like the monster that you're killing for the parts, which very nice little design aspect, I have to say. But
well, most of them do. Some of them are a little far-reaching.
Yeah, some of them not quite so much. But of course, armor gives you defense, like any other armor would in any other RPG game. It's just a number. It determines how hard you get hit, and there are elemental resistances too.
In some games, armor is just aesthetic, whereas in this one, you need this defense.
Unless you're really good.
Even if you're really good.
Hey, if someone can do Elatrian naked.
I don't think you were...
I've seen it. It can be done. It's just really hard.
I don't know, Meg. Are you sure that wasn't Karma armor?
I'm pretty sure.
Something.
No, people who are bored and have a little too much time on their hands will occasionally do naked runs in Monster Hunter, because if you're really, really skilled, you can do that. But it's very hard.
I wouldn't suggest.
No, it is not something for newbies to try. It's very, very, very hard.
We should do naked, what was the Amagasuchi?
Oh, good lord. Amatsu Magatsuchi. Magachi.
Yeah.
I don't know if the U is silent.
Tamagotchi. Him, yeah. Oh my god, it's Gucci. Yeah, him. I
yeah,
like him.
Amatsu. Let's call him that, shall we? But,
sure, why not? Amatsu, Tatsu, Hatsu, Batsu technique.
Moving on.
Yes.
On top of the standard, elemental resistances and defense that you come to expect from armor in an RPG setting, there are also skills in Monster Hunter. Mm-hmm. And each piece of armor will give you a point or so in a skill. And don't think that that's enough. You need to have, it's usually about 10 points that you need for most of them before the skill will actually activate. So if you only have +1 or +2, it's not doing you any good. A lot of newbies don't know that, and they get very confused about it. So, just putting that out there.
So, with the... Alright, did we go
Well,
over
let's
skills?
talk a little bit about some of the skills.
Yeah, let's do skills. So, you have your defense resistances, of course, and with the armor, they will use... No, they always do. They always have some skill, positive or negative, attached to them, and you can stack these accordingly, and that's where making your clown suit comes into play.
Yes, because normally an entire set will give you, so many skills, but sometimes it has a skill that maybe you don't want, and you want another skill instead, and then you have to mix and match with other pieces of armor to get those skills that you want.
And talismans.
And talismans. Well, in Try and Onward, you also have an extra slot, basically, as far as your armor goes, that is for the talismans that you can get via mining or sometimes as rewards for quests. But they're kind of random, but they are basically just skills. They will give you skill points in various things.
Sometimes you'll get one that has nothing, but it'll have 3 slots on it, which is also a very welcome thing. Because say you're wearing Rathalos armor, and you want that attack up large, but you only have enough for medium, and then only at +17, you slot in another attack charm, and now you're at attack.
Well, yeah, one of the things that you can do to customize your armor is to put decorations in it, which will give you skill points in various things.
Most armor will be slotted for that, as will the weapon. So that gives you access to perhaps a whole nother skill maxed out.
Which is why it's always good to... the weapons aren't just about pure power. It's always good to see how many slots a weapon has, because the very, very strong weapons usually don't have any slots, or might have, only 1 slot, whereas this slightly less powerful weapon might have 3 slots, and then you can get that skill that you really want.
Or to make up for the gap in power with the extremely powerful weapon. Always a plus. So how do the skill points work?
Well, like I said, you usually have to get +10 in order to activate it. The skills are many and varied. Some of them are very simple. Some of them will allow you to start off in a quest with extra hit points or extra stamina. Others will make it easier for you to, say, eat a potion. It will make it faster for you to eat the potion, because there is a delay. You can't just chug a potion down. Your character does a little animation that makes it difficult for you to do. It's a wonderful little, I'm Superman kind of pose that he does.
Yes.
But
I do that every day after I eat a bowl of cereal. What are you talking about?
But it's there for a reason, as annoying as it is. You have to be skillful in deciding, when to take that potion, because you might get hit if you take it at the wrong time. So there's that skill. There's also skills like sharpness +1, which will increase the sharpness of your weapon, which makes it much easier to cut through, say, a very hard monster that has, a very tough shell. It also gives it a damage. The sharper the weapon, the higher the sharpness of a weapon, the more damage it does. It has a damage multiplier added to it.
We'll get into that when we get weapons.
We'll get more into that a little bit later. And there's other skills like evade, which makes it easier to dodge things, or evade distance, which makes your dodge roll that you do longer. And all kinds of weapons. I highly recommend finding one of the multitude of wikis out there about Monster Hunter and looking them up for whatever particular game that you're getting, because there's a lot of skills.
Yeah, the skills, like she said, to get the minimum usually will be 10. Anything below that will not activate the skill. So positive or negative, if it's below 10, if you have something that lowers your defense all the time, but it's -9, it will not affect you. Where if it hits 10, then you have a problem.
Yes, and there are also negative skills too. As you know, if you have +10 in a skill, usually it gives you a buff, but if you have -10 in the skill, it will give you a debuff. It will hurt you. For example, if let me think of one here.
Demonic blessing.
Yeah, demonic blessing. Is that defense? Is that defense?
That's defense.
Okay. I
lowers your defense.
I didn't know if that was the defense skill or if that was one of the other skills. But yeah. So -10 in defense will lower your overall defense, and you will take more damage.
Whereas the opposite is also true. If you have, +10, 15, I think 20 defense, you will have even more.
Some skills have multiple levels to them, whereas +10 will give you a small boost, +15 will give you a medium boost, and +20 will give you the largest boost.
Yes. Not all of them have this. Some of them max out at 10, some max out at 15. So be aware of that. Don't just make charms recklessly and waste your money and resources.
Right. So shall we go on to weapons then?
Yeah.
Because
which should we start
there are
with?
a lot of weapons in Monster Hunter. It's one of the best things about it, because they are all very different from one another. And if you're getting tired of playing one, if you just start trying out a new one, it's like you're playing a whole different game. Sometimes, because they are very, very different. So let's...
My favorite is the staff. It allows me to cast heal on my party.
Very funny.
And it grants me vision. What?
Yeah, sure.
It does. Okay, so we'll start off with the basics. Like we said earlier, you have your two basic classes. Your Blade Master and your Gunner.
Which, don't be confused by the name. Blade Master is not just for swords. There are also hammers and lances in there as well. But
it's basically anything you have to
It's a melee class. It is the melee class.
Okay, I can go with that.
Yeah.
It's a little better.
And the Gunner class is the ranged. So, let's start...
Which has the least amount of weapon. Gunner has the least amount, but it makes up for it in a different way, which we'll get to. So we'll start off sword and shield.
Sure, let's just go right down the line.
Sword and board, right?
That is, of course, the Blade Master class. This is the one you usually start off with because it's it's very easy to use. Very simple, yes. Of course, it's a very fast weapon. You can block with your shield. It's not a very strong block. You will probably get knocked backwards when you do it, but it will, help you keep from taking damage. And the one really nice thing about the sword and shield is that you can actually use items while your weapon is drawn. And most of them, certain items while your weapon is drawn. But most weapons, you have to sheath your weapon before you can use an item.
The only other... I'm just trying to think, what is it? You can cut off pieces with the sword and shield?
Yes.
And I think you can stun with the shield, right?
In Try and Onward, you have a shield bash move that you can do, which will stun a monster if you hit it in the head enough times. There are different types of damage that different weapons can do. There is slashing, or slashing/cutting, whatever you want to call it. There's impact damage, which is what the hammer and the hunting horn and the shield on the sword and shield does.
And the greatsword.
Yes. I never use greatswords. I always forget about that one.
Greatswords
But
amazing.
There's impact damage, and there's gun damage, actually. I forget what the actual...
Okay. Is it actually... I was going to say, it's not called gun
No,
damage,
it's I forget what the... Projectile, I guess, would be the best way to put it. Projectile damage.
Okay.
But, yes. And different monsters will take different damage depending on what you're using against it, where you are hitting the monster. Because some monsters say they're very weak to impact damage on their heads, but a sword does almost nothing. Whereas their tail may be very weak to cutting damage.
Yes. The other thing to remember is monsters have two modes to them. I think we forgot to mention this. When you get them down to a certain point, they will get really pissed off, and they will enter rage mode, and their attacks usually get more frenzied, and they do a decent amount more damage. And sometimes their attacks change completely, as do their appearance.
Yes, most monsters will roar when they go into rage mode. It usually happens after you've done so much damage, and it will usually wear off after a little while, and then if you do more damage, it will obviously kick them back into rage mode again. Most of them will roar, most of them will have some indication physically that you will be able to see to tell that it is in rage mode, not just that it's moving faster and it's hitting harder. For example, Diablos will snort smoke out of his nostrils. Rathalos does this too. I think Kurapeko, his tail kind of like turns red. Yes. And so it's all different. You have to be observant.
I was gonna say, don't you usually see their breath coming out, like in all monsters, or is that when they're tired? Like with the bear.
Oh, Arzuros, however you say his new name.
Yes.
I'm not really sure.
Because I'm pretty sure that you can always see their breath coming out of their mouth when they're rage mode, but it might be tired. I'll have to go back and check.
Well, when they're tired, they're usually drooling, and that's another thing. That's something that was added in Tri, is that monsters also have stamina, and that will slowly wear down over time. Is usually refreshed when they go into rage mode. Their stamina refreshes itself, but they will get tired.
Like
they will usually run away and try to either rest or eat something to regain their stamina.
So much like the hunter, the monsters are also limited to how long they can fight and how much they can do during the fight. Okay. Well, back on the topic of weapons, since we have meandered off to monsters, the Sword and Shield is usually not the strongest class, but it usually holds the most statuses on it. I see.
For a melee, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, for a melee. So while your Sword and Shield may only have like 200 damage on it, that might be a little high, I don't know, it will have a very high sleep rate on it. So the more you slash at the monster, the faster it goes to sleep.
Besides elemental damage, which swords are actually also very good for. There's also statuses in the game that you can put on a monster. There's poison, paralysis, and sleep. And those are the major ones.
And but as the fight goes on, they will become more immune to it. It might take more slashes.
Yeah, some monsters are very resistant right off the bat. But the more you do, say, poison to a monster, the more resistant it will become. They will never become 100% resistant, but they will build up that resistance.
I think when they're tired, they also they're
usually
more vulnerable to it. Usually. One thing back on the topic of monsters, like Rin was saying, they do drool. Some of these monsters will drop something, or the drool may actually hurt you in some sort of way, giving you a debuff.
Sometimes.
You know which monster we're talking about, but
yes,
it's for another episode, another day. All right, moving on. Since Sword and Shield out of the way,
yes.
Dual Blades.
Dual Blades are kind of the counterpart to the Sword and Shield.
Some of the coolest weapons, honestly.
Yes. Rather than having a sword and a shield, you now have two swords. And they're very fast, they're very stylish, very short range. Not the best thing for cutting off tails because of that, because since monsters usually are rather tall and have their tails well above your head, it can make cutting tails off a little difficult, but you can get around that.
Their main point is to just put out so much damage. They're the DPS.
Pretty much, yes. Well, if you want to say it, all the weapons are DPS, but we don't really.
Well, they pump out the most damage the quickest. I feel maybe outside of guns.
Well, it's situational.
Okay.
Dual blades can be tricky to use, especially in the older games, because you almost needed to have your infinite stamina items to use the dual blades with for any length of time, because the dual blades do use a lot of stamina. They have a mode, they keep changing the name of it. I think it's usually called Demonize or Demonization or something like that. But
so you enter your Demonize mode or whatever.
And you start consuming stamina as soon as you do that. But the bonus is that you have an attack boost. You can do what's called the Demon Dance, which is, I forget what the button combo is to do it. But basically your character stands there and wails away at the monster. You do have to be careful, though, because it's very easy to get stuck in that. You can't get out of a Demon Dance once you're doing it. So...
And it's pretty funny. And your run changes to a dash. A constant.
Yes, portable third onwards. It changes into
a short burst,
this sort of ninja side dash thing, which is very
useful,
very cool.
But it drains your stamina a lot faster.
In portable third and onwards, you also have a bar. I forget what they're calling it in the in Tri Ultimate.
It's called a sword bar.
But you build this up as you do attacks while you're in demon mode, and once this bar is filled, you can exit demon mode and still retain some of the attack buffs and the sideways dash as if you were still in demon mode, but you are no longer consuming stamina. And as you do attacks on the monster when you are not in demon mode, the bar drains down until it goes back to 0 and you have to build it back up again.
On that note, instead of going to the next one, let's use that bar and jump into
Yes, because the longsword also has a bar. Longsword is somewhat similar to the dual blade. It has no shield. The only defense you have is to dodge. But it has a much longer reach than the dual blades. It's slightly very good for cutting off tails. Slightly slower than the dual blades, but not that much.
But it makes up for it.
And there's also, like I said, the gauge. This is called the spirit gauge for the longsword, and it is built up by doing a specific set of combos that you can do with mostly the R button. But that will build up.
As I'm sure that people heard Casey talk about, that you will attack a monster, and your bar will slowly fill up, and once it hits a certain point, you do the combo, and you do this cool, very anime-esque slash through them.
Right.
And then you sheathe your sword.
And
you have that.
And it gives you a buff. Yeah, basically it changes color. I think it starts off white, then it goes to yellow, and then to red. Each one gives you a slightly higher attack boost to your damage. In Tri Ultimate and Portable Third, right? Yes.
I don't know. What are you talking about?
You can't keep that buff forever. You have to keep building it up. It will eventually deplete. Unlike in Tri, where once you had, I think it was the white and the yellow, was kept infinitely until you died, which is very overpowered, by the way. But, yes.
Best in PvP.
Yes, that's another thing we should probably mention. There is no real PvP in Monster Hunter. You can't really damage... you can if you're creative, but you can't really damage your teammates by hitting them so much.
You don't need to. You just make them die in a different way, that's all.
But you can knock them over, you can knock them around, you can toss them through the air if you're using a weapon that can do that. So you do have to be careful. The longsword, it is very, very easy to accidentally hit your teammates because it is a very long weapon. It has a very wide...
Same with the dual blades.
Well, the dual blades are much shorter, so it's a little bit easier to get out of the way. With the longsword, it's...
Yes and no, because if you are next to them and you're also trying to get that whatever, it's like...
But the longsword has a much wider range of attack, so it's very easy to accidentally hit someone, even if they're not that close to you.
Same with the SNS, much like dual blades, it will probably knock someone over if you're not careful about where you aim. So with the longsword, though, if you keep attacking this monster by not using your spirit, I think if you do not use the spirit stuff, you can keep it up for a good amount of time.
Keep what up for?
Your spirit gauge. Don't you? If you do the combo, it goes down, right? Or if you keep
the combo refreshes it.
Which one
as long as you finish the combo, you have to finish the combo.
I haven't used LS in forever. I'm sorry.
No, you have to finish the combo, and it will refresh your gauge.
And then you can attack a little bit. It starts going down, do your combo again. Put it up. So great swords. The greatest weapon.
This is the weapon that people usually think of when they think of Monster Hunter, because it's usually on the artwork. It is very iconic. It is basically a gigantic sword. Think, Cloud's Buster sword from Final Fantasy VII. Gigantic weapon. Unlike Cloud, you are not winging this thing around like it weighs nothing. They are very... Or with one hand. No, it is a two-handed weapon. It is very slow. It is very heavy. If you are walking about with it unsheathed, your character will move very slowly. So...
But it is also one of the highest damaging weapons.
Yes, it is very powerful to make up for the slow speed. Go on.
carry. It's okay. Great swords usually carry some nice elementals on them.
Usually, but as with most of the heavier, slower weapons, the element is less important than it is to the higher speed weapons. Yes. That has to do with the mechanics of how elemental damage is figured out.
The elements won't be as prominent, but it is a nice touch to when you are fighting certain monsters. So if they are weak to fire, you have your fire greatsword. You will deal a decent amount more of damage on top of your.
And occasionally, depending on the game you're playing, some monsters may require a particular element to break a certain part of them. So that's always a good thing to have.
Yes, greatswords can do slashing and impact damage.
Yes, well, the impact damage is only was it only one move that it does the impact? The side slap, isn't it?
Yep, you do a kick and then you slap them with your sword.
Yes, that does impact damage, and it does a KO status, a knockout status, if you do it to their head, to the monster's head, and if you build up enough of that KO damage, it will fall over with stars flying around his eyes. Poor thing.
And it make a little noise too, which is great. Greatswords also have a charge feature. There are 3 stages to it. And while you're charging, you cannot move.
This isn't like a charge where you're charging at something. This is you're charging up power in the sword. You're holding it over your shoulder, usually.
You are literally holding the sword over your shoulder with both hands, and you are standing there still while you charge up this thing. And you can release it at any point.
But if you release at certain points, especially after it's fully charged, it will have a tremendous attack multiplier to it.
Yes, like we said, though, the downside is you cannot move.
And the monster will be moving.
You can't really change... you cannot really change trajectory either. So once you are facing direction, this is it.
So you have to have very good timing with the greatsword if you're going to be charging it.
Usually after maybe a monster is KO'd or stunned, you can do that full charge, get your combo off, and deal a lot of damage, tons of damage. That is another reference that someone will get.
Okay. I'm missing all the references tonight.
It's okay. I hold nothing against you. I do, but it's not the point. What else? Did we not touch anything else on greatswords?
Well, there's not much else to talk about, is there? You can also block with the greatsword. You just kind of hold it in front of you and acts as a shield. It does decrease your sword's sharpness, which you can replenish, of course, with whetstones. But it's not like a shield with a sword and shield or the lance. It will reduce your sharpness. No.
There are also skills that will increase the sharpness of your weapon.
Those are useful to have.
You can use that to your advantage. Also, auto guard.
Anyway.
Moving on. So, now to my favorite weapon.
Yes, the hammer. The hammer is the impact weapon that we were talking about. Its primary purpose is to deal KO damage to the beast's head and knock it out so everybody else can go crazy on it. But they have no, again, like the longsword and the dual blades, they have no shields. They don't really have any defensive abilities except to dodge. It's purely damage. It is not as slow as the greatsword. It is slightly slower than the longsword, but not by much.
I feel it is a more, it gives you a little bit more range of movement than a greatsword, definitely. Like, instead of me having to go through the motions to move, I can dodge out of it, and then I can go into another combo, kind of.
Okay, I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
It does have a slightly shorter range than, say, a longsword or a greatsword, as the hammer, but,
Usually hammer users will get the fast charge skill, perhaps even, certain ones will give you KO.
Yeah, yeah. But like the greatsword, the hammer is a weapon that you can charge up. Unlike the greatsword, you can move while you are charging the hammer.
So you can get, if it's out of position, you can run up to it. It depletes your stamina though, as you charge. You cannot roll, that will break the charge. And like I said, if you need to, the monster's moving around, you can get into position, wait for it to pass, and then just hit it right in the head. Or whatever weak point you need to.
So a bit more maneuverable than the greatsword. But still very, very powerful as far as raw damage is concerned.
Definitely.
It's stronger than the longsword or the dual swords in terms of individual hits being...
Definitely not heavy on the elemental part again, but much like the greatsword, raw power and the impact damage, and usually this is essential to a hunting
Yes,
party.
it's a very, very good weapon to have. Just so you can knock the monster out and get in those free hits.
So when you're making a party, always be sure to have someone that can do impact damage, usually a hunting horn or a hammer.
Speaking of which...
Speaking of which, let's jump into hunting horns. Not quite my forte.
I'm a little rusty on them myself.
I
They changed...
I know our friend Dryden loves them.
But they changed a lot in between Portable Third and Tri-Ultimate and the older games. But,
I'll let you have it
the
then.
Hunter Horn is the counterpart to the hammer. It does impact damage. It has a slightly longer range than the hammer does. There are some moves it can do that will hit a monster's head a lot easier than, depending on what you're fighting, of course, than a hammer will. But the big...
I will say it's a lot more flexible.
It cannot charge up, though. I don't think so, anyway.
No. But it makes up for that in a different way, which is very useful to the entire
It is
party.
definitely a support weapon, because you can use it to play different notes. The notes that it can play will depend on which hunting horn you're using, but they will all do something useful, and you can string these notes together to give you and your teammates buffs. And some of these buffs, depending on what they are, you can give infinite stamina to everyone in your group for a period of time. You can boost people's attack power. You can boost their defense. You can give them immunities to various statuses, like being covered in mud or snow. Or you can give them immunity to immunity to nasty sounds that would make them flinch normally. So, very useful support weapon.
And it can also, if you, like she said, it does impact damage. So you can actually replace a hammer with this and have it support you. But the only problem I feel with it is you have a lot more flexibility with your movements because you can string different notes. But while you're playing your song, you cannot move.
Right. Well, they did address this a bit between the older games and the new ones. In the older games, you went into recital mode when you were playing your notes, and you could basically do nothing else while you were doing that. You were pretty much stuck. You could hit things when you're changing notes, and that's about it. In the newer games, they have it. I haven't really played it that much, so I'm not all that knowledgeable about it. But basically, you get the notes out as you're swinging your hammer around, hitting the monster, and then you go into recital mode, play those notes that you want to play, and then you're out, and boom, there's your buff.
Yep. I would also say, I was going to say, there's one more weakness to it. It's it definitely lacks the power.
Yes, it's not as powerful as a hammer. It's still pretty good amount of raw damage, though.
Oh yes. Yeah, if you want to break something quickly, get a hammer. If you think the fight might last a while and you need more of a sustained thing,
or you're hunting with other people who would greatly benefit from having your buffs.
Yes. Usually, I wouldn't. I'm not big on taking hunting horns on solo missions.
Well, I've seen some people use it to great effect, but it takes a lot of skill to use it.
Yeah, I mean,
a lot more skill. Let's put it that way.
Well, a lot more skill than the next weapon.
The lance.
I would say.
See,
lance.
now this is something I've hardly ever used, so maybe you better talk about the lance.
Oh yeah, let's talk about Shark Attack. Okay. Oh yeah. Translator's note: the Shark Attack is an event item from Monster Hunter Tri that is literally a shark as your lance, and a no swimming sign with a bite out of it as your shield. It deals water damage and it is very weak.
Well, for a low rank weapon, it's actually quite good, but as you get higher in the ranks, it's not that great.
You don't have a lot of water element lances. Yeah. That's the problem.
But moving on,
and that's probably the strongest. Okay, so lances. Lances are they're a lance and a shield. You can poke, you can block, and you can run.
Yes,
at
the charge is quite fun.
It
is not, however, the most powerful move, and it does burn down your sharpness quite a lot when you're doing it, as long as you're hitting the monster while you're doing it.
Oh, yeah.
So keep that in mind. Don't bowl your teammates over.
Bowl them over anyway. They'll appreciate it when you get them to the next area quicker. You also, on her note of the sharpness whittling down, if you're hitting a harder part of the monster with it, it will go down even
Well, that
faster,
goes for any weapon. That goes for any weapon.
Well, but you're running into it so much, it's like, ugh, it's ridiculous. So, you have quite a few different moves on the lance. I'd say it might be one of the more versatile weapons in that sense. You have your standard forward poke. You can poke 3 times. Do a little. Oh, lances also have their special dodge. You don't. You can. I think
not
you can roll?
with it out.
Okay, yeah. With it put up, you can roll. When it's out,
yes, you hop rather than roll,
and you can control which way you hop.
That's something I never got very good with. So.
It's so easy.
I'm terrible at it.
You do.
Hey.
I noticed. You do 3 pokes. You do 3 pokes with your lance. You take a jump back and you poke again, and this is kind of a combo. And
there's 2 different types of poke. There's more
effective.
a horizontal poke, and then there's an upward poke that you can do.
I was getting there, Mom. Either, but as she said, there is the slightly upward, kind of 45-degree angle poke, which is good for hitting taller monsters in certain places. And lances can cut off tails. So, very good if you're behind the monster. Poke.
Yes, especially in very tall monsters that other weapons may have a hard time reaching. Because the lance probably has the longest reach out of any weapon.
There's also the counter attack.
That's Try and Onward that had that.
Yes. Which I honestly never got good at, but I don't really see the need to
Basically,
use
your character stands there with a shield. Once you get hit by a monster, it will do an attack as a counter.
You go into a special pose, though, so it's like
you'll
know when you're doing it. And then you have your run attack, which is you just chase after the monster or whichever way you're facing, and you run.
Yep, and you can change direction, but not very easily
damage,
while you're charging. It's very good to grief your teammates with that.
It's also very good to try and trip up a monster as they're running away. Is there anything else I missed about? Oh, well, I guess their damage is
yes, they're rather high damage. Not as high as, say, a hammer or a greatsword, but quite high. They're the most defensive weapon because they have that great big shield, and they will take the least amount of chip damage from guarding an attack, and the least amount of knockback from guarding.
Yeah.
If there's any knockback at all.
I can't really think of anything else. It goes very well with critical draw.
Does it?
And yeah, I feel it does. That initial poke, because what it does is when you first draw a weapon, you get a very good lunge in. And that one hit, I mean, that's me. I'm probably going to completely honest, but
I don't use lances.
That and auto guard.
But
auto guard.
You and your auto guard. Moving on, then the counterpart to the lance is the gun lance, which is the gunpowder powered version. I don't know even what you want to call it. It's basically a lance with a gun on the end, sort of. It's kind of a strange weapon. You can poke at monsters like you would with a lance, but it also does what's called shelling. It has up in the corner. It will show you how many shells you can shoot at a monster, and these shells do a fixed amount of damage, depending on what type they're and various other factors. But these are very good for very heavily armored monsters, because it's a fixed amount of damage. It ignores defense. So it would always do the same amount of damage every time, no matter where you hit the monster. So if you have a very heavily armored monster that's not taking a lot of damage from anything else, shell it. There you go.
One fun tip about gun lances is you can also use the gunner skill load up on it.
It's probably the only melee weapon that gets a boost from a gunner skill.
Yes, very interesting, as load up is a very weird thing to load up. Yeah, load up. It's a very weird skill to slot.
Basically, it gives, with the gun lance, I believe it gives you an extra shell that you can use. And gun lance also has the super-powered Wyvern Fire ability. Basically, your character stands there with his shield up and his lance pointing forward and charges up, and kaboom! His great big fireball blasts the Wyvern.
It will use all your shells.
You can reload them, but of course it takes a moment for you to go through the reloading animation. And there is a cooldown period on the Wyvern's fire.
Usually 2 to 3 minutes, but it might vary per weapon.
I don't think it varies per weapon. It is there is a skill, I believe. I don't know if it's in the newer ones. I know it was in Freedom Unites. That I think it's Gunnery is the skill that reduces the cooldown on Wyvern's Fire, among other things.
Riot just buffed cooldown quints, so be sure to purchase those on the League of Legends store.
God, you and your League of Legends.
But no, I like to do that. Gun lances, though, do have a very different...
Yes, they can't do the charge, the running charge that lances can do. And I think they added a couple moves in Portable Third Tri-Ultimate. I think there's one that does like a horizontal and it launches all of your shells in sort of like a horizontal spray in front of you. Very cool looking.
I would say don't think of the gun lance as a lance. Think of it more of as a cannon.
A very short range cannon. Yes.
Yes. Well, I guess
I suppose. Yeah, it's a very unique weapon. Let's put it that way. I had to think of the right word to phrase it, because it's not like anything else I've ever seen in any sort of fantasy game before.
Yeah, you don't really poke things. You actually hit it a few times and then you slam it down on them for certain attacks, which is like, oh Jesus. I'd say it's not a very
no, it's a very complex weapon.
You have to watch your shells. You have to know when to do Wyvern Fire, which attacks to use. Your shield does guard, but it's not.
It's slightly less guarding than guarding. It's not quite as good as the lance shield, but it's better than the sword and shield or the great sword block.
Right.
Shall we? Moving on. The next weapon, the last melee weapon is the Switch Axe, which was, it was added in Monster Hunter Tri, so it's a relatively new weapon. Why don't you talk about it since it's your favorite?
Well, next to the hammer. But the Switch Axe is a very unique weapon in that it can transform. You start off as an axe, which you have your basic slashing attack, and then you can enter an infinite combo attack if you mash down a button. And it will drain your stamina, and it will, deplete sharpness, not at a very rapid rate, but it's very useful when you're, like, say, on the back of an event monster called Jin Moran, and you need to hack away as quick as possible. You just enter that, and then it's good for stationary things, or stunned monsters. But when you transform, it turns into a greatsword type, and you get a whole different set. You can do more, different slash. You do a much nicer horizontal and vertical slash, a lot cleaner, and you have a gauge that we'll show you. That I'll get into in a moment. The gun. Oh Lord, I guess it's kind of like a gun in this sense. The Switch Axe sword mode also has a burst. An elemental burst, I believe, if it has an element. And
well, it depends on what file I believe the thing has, which is kind of like the Switch Axes. Well, not exactly like the element. It's kind of separate from the element. But continue.
Right. But you will rear your sword into the monster, and you'll just kind of stand there charging it up, and it'll just explode.
And it does actually do damage as it is charging, I believe.
Yes.
Right.
If you hit the monster with it, it does. And it will knock you back a bit, and you will re-enter.
And then you will have to recharge your file. Well, it depends, but usually the burst is enough that you need to recharge it, which is done by just attacking in Axe mode, or you can reload it manually, which will take a moment. But
isn't there a reload skill?
I don't know if it affects Switch Axes. We should
find out.
But anyway,
that'd be interesting. A little tip with that: the best thing to do is use attack with it. When it gets to just under half, switch back to axe, reload it, and you'll have almost full again.
And
because once it hits down to the bottom, you have to wait for it to recharge, or you have to reload it. It takes quite a while. So it deals deals slashing damage. Very useful as it can. It's just a very versatile weapon. You also have the side hop with it. I think you can side hop and you can roll.
I think so. I'm not sure, but
Yeah. If my memory serves me, and it's got good reach. Usually they are very strong. The elemental is okay, but very strong weapon, very versatile, very good in fighting a lot of monsters.
Okay.
Okay, so getting into our next set of weapons, completely different from the Blade Master set, as we said earlier, the Gunners.
Mm-hmm. And there are 3 different gunner weapons, 2 of which are basically a variant on each other. One is the light bowgun, the other is the heavy bowgun, very similar to each other. The light bowgun being the smaller and more maneuverable of the 2, and is basically a support weapon, especially in multiplayer. It has the rapid fire ability, which will allow you to use 1 shot of ammo and fire off multiple shots with that one single, for the cost of 1 shell, basically. Yes. And it will do more damage, usually, than if you had only done the single shot. Bowguns have the added advantage over melee weapons that they are not restricted to a single element. So if you're fighting multiple monsters, it's especially good because you can take advantage of different elemental weaknesses. You can have fire shots for one monster and thunder shots for another monster or whatever, as long as your bowgun can support it, because they are different from each other. No bowgun can shoot all different types of ammo.
Sadly.
Yes, they're very good for statusing a monster, for poisoning and paralysis and sleep.
Mm-hmm. I feel they're also very good for targeting certain bits when other players can't get to it.
Mm-hmm. Especially the high, off the ground, hard to reach things, like say certain monsters' wings, like Elatrian or tails. Although you do have to use a very specific shot to do cutting damage on the tail if you plan on cutting it off.
Well, one of the fun things you can do is you could do just a 4-man bow party.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I'm sorry, bowgun party. And, you can each carry different types to support each other kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So one could be dedicated to breaking, one could be dedicated to cutting, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Although it's very hard to cut off a tail with a bowgun, because, as I said, there's only 1 shot type that does cutting damage, and you have to use cutting damage to cut off a monster's tail. So
yes.
You will probably need to bring materials to make extra shots if you're using those.
Well, you should be doing that anyway.
Yeah, as a gunner, gunners are very item use heavy. You go through a lot of materials if you decide to do nothing but gun. So yes. It can be a very expensive weapon to take up, which is why I recommend having a melee weapon that's kind of your main, and then bowgunning on certain monsters that you feel more comfortable bowgunning with.
Well, the payoff is very good in parties, that's for sure.
Yes, it's very good for multiplayer, especially the light bowgun, because as I said, it's much more maneuverable than the heavy bowgun, and it's very fast, and it has the rapid fire. And certain guns can also do rapid fire element, which is like super amazing for getting off statuses.
Yes.
But
as we I wanted to say though, the one thing you could do and try apparently was you can mix and match parts of the gun, 3 parts, into your own custom weapon that could shoot different types, different ways, with different reductions and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Sadly, that is no longer the case with the with Tri-Ultimate and onward. But I
don't know why they would take that out. I thought it was a great addition.
But yes,
because it made that bow gun feel more like this is my gun kind of thing. But
I imagine it also made it very difficult to balance the game, though. Because you couldn't just balance for a single gun. You had to imagine all the possible combinations that people could make.
Right. Okay, fair enough. So
heavy bowguns.
Yes. What's the difference here?
The difference with heavy bowgun is not quite as fast as the light bowgun. Is not as maneuverable. Your character is slower while you have the gun out. The payoff is that it is much more powerful than a light bowgun. It's much better if you intend on using it in single player to use a heavy bowgun, just for the sake of you might run out of time when you're hunting a monster if you're using a light bowgun. Heavy bowgun, in the newer versions anyway, has the benefit of siege mode, which basically you plant yourself down on the ground and you no longer have to reload. It depends on the shot types. You can't do siege mode with everything, but you don't have to reload, and you just stand there and fire and fire and fire and fire and fire, and you're a turret.
Until you either get up or the monster hits you.
Right. So bit difficult to use in single player. Multiplayer, though, if it's chasing after someone else, oh yes.
More than likely, you'll be positioned at a very nice spot, and you can just go off on it.
Mm-hmm.
Very useful.
Yes. And on the topic of customizing your gun, you can still have some amount of customization with the guns in the later weapons, because you can add shields to block roars and stuff like that. You can add a silencer to make the monster less likely to go after you. Fairly useless in single player, but not quite so bad in multiplayer, but it's still not usually the best choice. And there's also the power barrel, which will increase both the power of your shots, the raw damage that your shots do, and it will make it so that your shots will not swerve as much, because some guns have terrible deviation. Your shots will go flying off to the right, to the left, or up or down, and you will have to compensate for that.
You actually have physics taking effect in this game, so you actually have to aim properly.
But that's
on the topic of not aiming properly, though. let's move into our last weapon, the bow.
And this is your favorite of the ranged weapons.
Indeed, it is. The bow is a bow and arrow, but and it fires. You are a ranged weapon. You have to wear a gunner set for it. Unlike the bow guns, though, you do not use shots. You use coatings. You have an infinite amount of ammo.
Right. You are stuck to a single element, however.
Yes.
However, you can have different statuses.
Yes, you can have... Well, the coatings go as follows. You have your power, your sleep, your fatigue, paralysis, paint, which is ridiculous. And I feel like I'm missing one.
Poison.
And
there's also...
razor.
And razor coatings, the oft never used...
Razor coatings are good, though, I feel.
But
that's probably just me. Their specialty is the deviation is a little bit, but not enough to really affect you unless you're at very long range.
Unlike the bowgun, they do sort of arc the shots. These shots that will arc, they do not shoot straight.
Yes, but that's fine. Usually you're not going to miss.
Yeah.
Their specialty, though, much like how the heavy bowgun has a siege mode and the light has its rapid fire, you have a charge shot, which you can move around during. You plant yourself for just a moment, take aim at the monster, and it will usually bring up a little marker of where your shots are going to land, a little red ring. And you can focus this, and what it will do is, once you have it nice and I think it's, you have 3 levels of charge?
Usually. It depends on the bow.
Yes, the bow usually you can have between 1 and 3. I think there actually is some with 4.
The charge themselves is very interesting, because each bow has different levels of charge, and the type of shot that you do will vary depending on what the charge is. So say a bow, the first level of charge does rapid level 2, say. So that will fire usually 2 arrows at a time, and this is good for targeting very specific areas of a monster. Say you're trying to break something. Rapid is very good for that. And of course the level designates which power it is. I think level 5 is the highest that you can have.
Yes.
So that's your first level of charge. Your character kind of has this glow, and it kind of goes psh when it's like the first level. And
then you have scatter.
Right, so let's say that the second level of charge is scatter level 3. And scatter is very good for doing status with, because it shoots off a lot of arrows at once. It doesn't, it covers a wide area, so you kind of have to be close to the monster to make sure that all the arrows hit.
Yes, unless you're fighting a very large monster.
Right. But it's very good for getting off a lot of status, because each of those shots will do status to the monster, which will help it build up quickly and get that status off. And then there's also pierce. So let's say that the third charge that your bow does is pierce. And that will basically, it will go through a monster, and it will hit any hit zones that it goes through. It will hit that hit zone. This is very good for long monsters, very good for big monsters.
Like Rathalos.
Because the pierce is the longest shot out of all of the different types of shot that the bow can do.
And I think it deals, that cuts as slash damage, I believe.
I'm not sure. You can't cut things with it, but I don't know if it counts as slashing damage. Or
I want to say it does, but if it doesn't, I just know it deals damage to that area and weakens the bit. So if it can't break it itself, it will give another hunter an opportunity to break it with their weapon.
I don't know about that, but okay.
Don't quote me on that.
And then, of course, in Portable Third and onwards, there is the aerial rain of arrows attack. Once you've fully charged up your bow, there's this little target reticule on the ground.
Which I was getting into till some girl interrupted me.
Well, I didn't want people getting confused about the charge. Because it's rather integral to the bows, and it's in all versions of the games that's had bows.
Out of the way, I'm taking it from here.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So as she said, the little reticule shows up, and if you aim it properly, it will rain down just a little rain of arrows all over the monster, and it will apply any statuses or power coatings or any coating you have, applied. It will do that to the monster in that area, and it is very useful for just during the whole fight, really.
And
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, depending what type of bow you have, there are different effects that this rain of arrows can have. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, Adell? Because I know one of them is your absolute favorite.
Yes. There is just the regular one, which is an arrow, usually just a very long stick with a piece of metal jabbed on the end. And you can actually use these.
That is an arrow.
Yes. Just making sure they knew, yeah. Although technically, I guess they kind of are like longer, like kind of short swords in a way, in that you have a melee attack as a bow.
Right. That has nothing to do with the charge, but okay.
I know, it's still a point.
Okay.
It doesn't really do any damage, and you can't really do anything with it except maybe knock something away.
Well, it does do cutting damage. Sorry. You can technically cut a monster's tail off with it, but it's...
God help you if you do.
Yeah, good luck with that.
You can also use it to slay Venabras to carve them.
Sure?
I learned that the other day.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I was like, whoa.
Okay.
So you can use that, and it's not very useful, but you do have a melee attack in case something gets close to you.
Right.
But with the charges, you have the arrows, and they will just rain down. And if they hit anyone, I guess they'll flinch, or it won't affect them. The other one, though, it's my absolute favorite. You fire grenades.
Basically.
And when it hits it, it will deal little blast damage all over it. I'm sorry. Not blast damage, because blast damage is a new element in third ultimate.
It does explosive damage, I believe is the term. Yeah.
Okay. And if it misses any, it will hit the ground and knock other hunters away.
And that's why it's your favorite.
Yes, but it also has a very good flinch rate, so...
Yes, I believe it does explosive damage, so like the gun lance's shells, it does a fixed amount, depending on defense. But there's also other types of rain of arrows. There's a very wide area rain of arrows, which is, again, good for bigger monsters, and good for applying statuses as long as you can hit it with that wider area. Because obviously it's more arrows raining down, more points of status being applied to the monster. And then there's a more focused one, which is better for smaller creatures.
So usually I would not recommend a bow for a single player. It is good, but it's not a very fast weapon.
It's situational. Let's put it that way.
It's a very costly weapon as well, because the coatings, you can make them, but they will rack up very quickly as you will burn through all your coatings in one hunt.
And you won't be, powerless without your coatings, but it will gimp you a little bit.
Yeah, which is why I say, it's better in team fights, team fights. In group hunts, it can't really help much. It deals a decent amount of damage, though. It is good for a damaging type. You'll be doing comparable damage with, maybe say the long sword.
I'd say that, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to say great sword because that's ridiculous. So if you want to, if it's just a kill quest, take a bow. If it's going to be a longer quest like a Latrian, take a bow gun. Although I'm curious as to how Latrian is going to react to bows in this one.
I don't know. Well, we fought him in Portable Third.
Yeah, but I never took a bow to him.
I didn't either, to be honest.
But
anyway,
we should.
And I think that about wraps it up for our 101 Monster Hunter Intro to Monster Hunter episode.
Yes. Did you want to give any shoutouts, Rin?
I did, but first, in the future podcast videos, whatever you want to call this, we'll be talking more about the lore of Monster Hunter, because that's kind of what I like to focus on, and everybody that does Monster Hunter videos does Let's Play Monster Hunter and kill things. And I want this to be a little bit different from that.
How the hell do you LP Monster Hunter?
I've seen a lot of people do it. But,
I understand.
Check out Teamwork Cast. Their video series that they do. But, yes. So, a little bit different, a little more academic. Learn some things about the game you might not have noticed before. That sort of thing. I was going to
say, we'll probably delve into something other than lore, too, so...
Yes, I'm sure we're going to run out of lore to talk about at some point. But, I would like to keep the focus mostly on lore.
Fair enough, then, I guess.
And anyway, as for shoutouts, yes, I did want to give a couple shoutouts before we wrap this up. First one goes to Mr. Andrew Alfonso, otherwise known as Reno, on the Capcom Unity forums. He is currently the localization project manager / director at Capcom Japan, working on Monster Hunter. He worked on Freedom Unite. I don't think he was director for Freedom Unite, but he worked on Freedom Unite, he worked on Tri, and he's doing Tri Ultimate. And he was very kind and helped me to figure out how Pokke Village's name is actually supposed to be pronounced. So thank you.
Pokemon.
Thank you, Reno-san. Arigato.
Oh lord. Anyway.
So that's that, and I also want to thank the people who got me into being a lore geek in the first place.
You're welcome.
No, not you.
Oh wow, okay, I see.
No, that would be Strixus and Leto and Kay and Nobunaga and all the other awesome people that worked on the World of Warcraft lore podcast, the Ancient of Lore, the Lore Keepers, and the Council of Six. So thank you guys.
Nobunaga.
Thank you guys. You're awesome. Why are you not doing the show anymore? Please do the shows again.
Didn't he help unite Japan in feudal times?
Among other things.
So that'll wrap up this episode. We'll be back.
We don't know when. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, probably next week.
Something like that.
Be sure to check out our site, the Pocket Players, at pocketplayers.com.
Yes. And check out the Monster Hunter episode there, as well as all the other episodes, too.
Always a good thing to do. We appreciate the views, and...
Feel free to send us a message on the forums if you want to get in contact with us, or just write a comment on the video. Let us know what you think, give us feedback. Tell us what you'd like to see on the show, all that good stuff.
We don't really have a saying, do we?
We don't really have a saying, but that's okay.
That's sad. It's very bad to wrap up an episode without a saying. Oh well.
Oh well. This has been the Pokke Village Hunters, and we'll see you next week.
So long.
So long.